You're probably already familiar with conventional wisdom around retirement spending. The idea that you'll need a steady, inflation-adjusted income stream to cover your living expenses through those golden years. But what if I told you the way retirees actually spend their money follows a very different pattern? One that might actually mean you need up to 20% less in retirement savings than you originally thought. This little known and rarely discussed research is called the retirement spending smile, and it reveals a surprising truth about how retirement spending habits actually change over time. And understanding this pattern could be a game changer for your retirement. So in this video, I'll dive into the details of the retirement spending smile, what it is, why it happens, and most importantly, how it impacts how much money you'll need to live comfortably in retirement. And by the end, you'll have a clearer picture of your true retirement spending needs and how you can use this knowledge to potentially reduce the amount that you need to save. Sound good? Let's dive in. The research paper we're focusing on today is called Estimating the True Cost of Retirement. It was written by David Blanchett of Morningstar. This study found that retirees' spending patterns do not actually follow conventional assumptions of a steady, inflation-adjusted withdrawal from their portfolio. Instead, the paper reveals that retiree spending follows a smile pattern with three distinct phases: a go-go phase, a slow-go phase, and a no-go phase. A concept that was further popularized by Michael Stein, a CFP professional who popularized the three-phase concept many years ago. So let's unpack those three phases. Now, the early years of retirement are often called the go-go years. In this phase, retirees tend to have higher than average levels of spending. This is often due to increased discretionary spending on travel, maybe hobbies, and other leisure activities now that they have more free time and energy. As retirees move into their mid to late 70s, their spending starts to decline and they enter the slow-go phase. And that phase is characterized by a more gradual decrease in spending as retirees become less active and they spend less on those discretionary purchases. And finally, in the later years of retirement, often called the no-go years, retiree spending continues its downward trend, only seeing a slight uptick in the latest years where healthcare and medical costs can sometimes creep in. Now, notably though, despite the common fears, the data found that even with the uptick of these healthcare costs as retirees age in their later years, it's actually not enough to offset all of the other spending decreases that tended to occur as retirees age into the no-go years and other discretionary expenses fall significantly. Now, interestingly, the research found that this spending smile pattern is especially pronounced for more affluent retirees who tend to have more discretionary spending that winds down even more aggressively over time. Now, lower net worth households, on the other hand, they're going to experience a less of a dip in those middle years as they have less flexibility in their budgets and less of their spending was already going to discretionary purchases. By the way, I'm Steve Willems, a wealth advisor with the Willems Wealth Planning Group out here in BC. We started this channel many months ago to help you plan for your own retirement, helping you think about and arrange your investments, your income streams, and ideally have you pay less tax along the way. Now back to that research. The key finding from that research report is that retirees may need to spend up to 20% less in savings than conventional wisdom might suggest. Now, this is due to the unique spending pattern revealed by this retirement spending smile. You see, the traditional approach to retirement planning assumes a pretty steady inflation-adjusted withdrawal from a portfolio. So a common rule of thumb is going to be the 4% rule, often illustrated for its ease of calculation. The reality is that retirees' actual spending tends to follow this pattern. Higher in the early years, in those go-go years, a dip in the middle, all the way continuing down to the no-go years, and then a final little spike up at the end to cover those healthcare costs. But rarely does that total spending go in excess of those go-go years after accounting for inflation. This spending smile means retirees don't actually need the kind of savings that they otherwise might have thought they were if it was that set and forget steady spending all the way through retirement. Now, unfortunately, most retirement plans and online calculators just don't have the sophistication or kind of complexity to account for this nuanced spending behavior. They're still relying on the outdated assumption of a flat spending pattern. And so as a result, many Canadians may technically be over-saving for their retirement, setting aside perhaps more than what might be truly needed for them to live comfortably. So let's take a look at how the retirement spending smile concept can be applied in real life. Let me introduce you to Jim. Jim is approaching 65 and he's trying to plan for active retirement. He has a sizable pension pot that he earned during his time in the movie industry. Credit to his union for that. And along with some additional savings, the combination of which he plans to use to fund his life in retirement. He wants to restore his old favorite 1972 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. And then he wants to do some traveling. He wants to explore the world. He's felt he's been kind of trapped inside this working bubble his entire life. Now, when we started working on Jim's retirement plan, the numbers didn't quite add up. His original plan locked in a static inflation-adjusted lifestyle spending amount that had him cutting pretty close by the time he was coming up to age 95. Now, to make the money last, he was already only pulling the minimum from his LIF accounts, which was the account that his defined contribution pension plan was converted into when he had retired. Now, by incorporating the retirement spending smile into our analysis, we were able to create a much more realistic and sustainable plan. So here's how it worked. In the go-go years, we factored in higher levels of discretionary spending in Jim's early retirement years to account for his travel and those other pursuits. And that allowed us to allocate a larger portion of his pension and his savings out to him towards those go-go years. In the slow-go years, as Jim moved into his mid to late 70s, we expected his spending to naturally kind of step down and decline as he becomes less active. So in this stage, he wasn't needing to draw as much out of his portfolio during those middle retirement years. Now, finally, in the no-go years, we had his spending continue to decline until the very end, where it stepped up just a little bit to cover those healthcare and long-term care costs that he might find himself facing. Now, how does this all add up? If we look at that first scenario of him taking just the minimum out of his pension account and then having flatline spending throughout the entire retirement, we see Jim's net worth here increasing to just over $4.4 million after all of his estate tax would have been paid out, and that would have been the net estate that would have been left for his kids. In scenario 2, where we took a little bit more early on and then reduced his spending based on that retirement spending smile, we actually see his net worth increasing to over $4.8 million, over $400,000 of improvement as a result of modeling his spending closer to how real life spending scenarios actually illustrate. This is really helpful for Jim, knowing that there was this kind of buffer and flexibility in his plan in the later stages of his life, and that the plan was actually modeled kind of according to evidence, according to research, not just based on those baseline assumptions that have been conventionally used. This is really encouraging for him. So there you have it, the surprising truth of how retirees actually spend money in retirement and what it might mean for how much savings you need to go into retirement. So armed with this research, go and grab a copy of your most recent financial plan and see if the lifestyle expense modeling incorporated this research. It needs to account for those ebbs and the flows of spending over time. If not, and you're getting close to retirement, it's probably time to get the plan updated. Reach back out to your financial planner who originally helped you, or if you'd like, feel free to shoot us a note and we can see if we can model out a more accurate assessment of where you stand. I'll put a link in the description below if you'd like a hand confirming how this might impact your own retirement spending plan. Hey, trust that was helpful. If it was, and you think others might benefit from this kind of evidence-based approach, feel free to forward this video on to them. You've got my permission to do that. In the meantime, we'll keep building this library of ways that we're helping Canadians retire with confidence, just one plan at a time. I'll see you in the next video.